Imagine an empire, mighty and proud, standing on the very precipice of ruin, haunted by the whispers of a cryptic, ancient prophecy. Now imagine a child born of the ruler's own blood, cast out into a dying land, stripped of his name, his birthright, his very existence. Before he could even speak a single word, his name was erased from the royal ledgers. His inheritance was denied. He was a shameful secret, a son sacrificed by his own father to protect a gilded lie. But what if the prophecy that everyone believed in, the very oracle that shaped the fate of a kingdom, was a carefully constructed deception? What if the key to salvation wasn't the golden heir celebrated by the world, but the forgotten ghost haunting the forsaken frontier? This is not merely a story of survival. This is the story of a buried truth, a quiet revenge sought not with the sword and flame, but with compassion and forgiveness. It is a story of a redemption so profound, it will shake an empire to its very foundations. Before we pull back the curtain and uncover the staggering secret of the two heirs, let's take a moment. We want to feel your presence, to know who is joining us on this journey tonight. In the comments below, tell us where in the world you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Let us know that across different time zones and continents, we are all here together, sharing this moment, holding our breath for a secret that is about to be revealed. And now let us travel back in time to the dominion of Valoria, where a single decision made in the shadows of a castle set in motion a story of tragedy, triumph, and unimaginable grace. The dominion of Valoria was a jewel, a prosperous and powerful land where towers of white marble kissed the azure sky and fields of golden wheat swayed in a gentle breeze, stretching to the horizon. Under the wise and steady rule of Lord Valerius, a leader of great renown and vision, Valoria had known decades of peace and abundance. The vassal lords were loyal, and the common folk lived in contentment. Yet beneath this shimmering veneer of tranquility, a specter of fear was silently weaving its shroud. It was the ghost of an ancient prophecy, carved into the foundation stones in the dynasty's deepest vault, a prophecy of ruin. The oracle foretold that when the stars in the Valoran sky grew dim and the earth itself began to groan, a great shadow would rise from the land, carrying pestilence and death, and it would consume all life. But the prophecy also offered a sliver of hope. It spoke of a true heir, one who carried the unity of the mountain and the river in their veins, who alone could stand against the shadow, cleanse the land, and restore the light. For many years, the prophecy remained a distant legend, a story told to frighten children. But then, the first signs began to manifest. The constellations did, in fact, grow inexplicably faint. Minor tremors began to disturb the borderlands. A chilling unease crept into every corner of Valoria, and every eye in the Dominion turned to Lord Valerius and his wife, the Lady Alara. They needed an heir. They needed the chosen one who would be their salvation. Lady Alara was a woman of breathtaking beauty and formidable intellect. She was Valerius's great love, his partner in all things, the rightful matriarch of Valoria. But fate had dealt her a cruel hand. She was barren. With every passing season, every unanswered prayer, an invisible wound deepened in her soul. Her pain was not merely the private grief of a woman who longed for a child, it was a political crisis. The vassal lords began to murmur. Eyes filled with doubt followed her through the grand halls of the citadel. They feared that without a direct successor to Valerius, Valoria would fracture into civil war, creating the very chaos the shadow would need to rise. The pressure on Alara was mountainous. She saw the worry etched on her husband's face. She heard the venomous whispers echoing in the corridors. Desperation, cold and sharp, began to supplant her grief. She knew she had to do something. If she could not bear the heir herself, she would have one created. On a stormy night with thunder rattling the stained glass windows, Alara went to Valerius. She laid before him a ruthless plan, a gambit born of absolute despair. She spoke of Anya, a young healer from the Deepwood clan, a tribe recently conquered and absorbed into the Dominion. It was rumored that the women of this clan possessed a potent vitality, a bloodline blessed with fierce fertility. Alara proposed that Valerius conceive a child with Anya. That child, though not born of her own womb, would still carry the Lord's blood. It would, at the very least, silence the dissenters and shore up their crumbling authority. Valerius was stunned. He looked at the wife he adored and saw for the first time not love, but a will of ice. He understood her agony. He understood the crushing weight of their duty. But this plan, it violated every principle he held dear. Yet as Alara invoked the prophecy again, as she painted a terrifying picture of a Valoria drowned in chaos and death, the Lord within him overruled the husband. With a soul heavy as lead, he acquiesced. He did not know that his reluctant nod would not only seal the fate of an innocent healer, but would also ignite a saga of love, betrayal, and a redemption that no one could have ever foreseen. Anya was brought to a secluded tower in the citadel, a place of quiet luxury that felt more like a gilded cage. She was not a wife nor a lover. She was an instrument, a vessel for a kingdom's hope. And in time, Matteo was born. He entered the world on a moonless night, his first cry echoing through the silent tower, a sound that was at once a joy and a somber reminder of a pact made in desperation. He was a perfect child, with a shock of night-dark hair and eyes the color of storm-swept stone, the very eyes of Lord Valerius. The first time Valerius held his son, all thoughts of politics and prophecy evaporated. All he saw was this tiny, perfect being, his own flesh and blood, looking up at him with eyes of pure, trusting innocence. A love that was primal and overwhelming surged through him, a feeling he could neither control nor wish to. In the first years of Matteo's life, that secluded tower became a private universe for father and son. Valerius, despite the immense demands of his office, carved out every spare moment to be with his boy. He taught him to read the complex star charts in the castle's observatory, naming the constellations and telling him tales of ancient heroes. He led him through secret gardens, teaching him to identify herbs, which ones could mend a wound, which could soothe a fever. The sound of Matteo's bright, clear laughter echoed through the lonely corridors, and to Valerius, it was the sweetest music in the world. But this fragile happiness was a dagger in the heart of Lady Alara. Every smile Valerius gave Matteo, every moment of paternal joy she witnessed from afar, was like a drop of poison in her soul. She saw in Matteo not an innocent child, but a living, breathing threat, a constant symbol of her own failure. He was a daily reminder that she, the great lady of Valoria, could not do what a conquered woman from the woods could. Jealousy, fear, and wounded pride twisted together into a toxic brew that festered within her. She began to see Matteo as an enemy, an obstacle that had to be removed. Then, the miracle that Alara had prayed for, wept for, and bargained for finally came to pass. She was with child. The news swept through Valoria like a cleansing fire, burning away the despair and igniting a blaze of celebration. The bells in every steeple rang out in joyous unison. The prophecy was coming true. The true heir was on his way. Alara gave birth to a healthy, beautiful boy with hair like spun gold and eyes the vibrant blue of the Valoran sky. He was named Liam. His birth changed everything. He was the hope of the dynasty, the answer to the oracle, the one and only legitimate son. The Dominion celebrated for weeks. Liam was swaddled in silks, celebrated by the world. And in the midst of this euphoria, the shadow of obscurity fell completely over Matteo. Now that she had her own heir, Alara had no more use for her husband's bastard son. His very presence had become an insult, a stain on her family's history, a secret she was determined to bury forever. The darkness in Alara's heart had finally found its purpose, and it was about to consume the world of an innocent child. The years passed. Liam grew up in the warm glow of adoration and privilege, while Matteo remained in his tower, a forgotten ghost in his own home. Valerius, though his heart still ached for his firstborn, was forced by duty and by Alara's constant pressure to devote his attention to Liam, his declared successor. The chasm between father and son grew wider each day, not from a lack of love, but from the cruel weight of destiny. Matteo, despite being denied the formal tutoring of a noble, flourished in his own way. He absorbed everything his father had taught him with astonishing speed, from military strategy on the chessboard to the gentle art of tending to the castle's hawks. He possessed a keen, innate intelligence, an intuitive understanding of the world, and a natural charisma that drew others to him. The catalyst for tragedy came during the annual tournament of Heirs, a day of games and drills for the children of the noble houses. The final challenge was to lead a small team through a mock forest, filled with simulated traps and obstacles, while the other noble children, including a hesitant Liam, fumbled with their maps and compasses. Matteo relied on instinct honed by years of exploring the castle grounds with his father. He didn't issue commands. He simply acted with a quiet confidence that inspired the others to follow. He showed them how to read the signs of the land, how to find clean water, how to use leaves to dress a minor scrape. Inevitably, his team was the first to emerge, unscathed and triumphant. This innocent display of skill was the weapon Alara had been waiting for. Seizing the moment, she summoned her most loyal lords and spun a venomous tale. She claimed that Matteo, the servant woman's son, was using dark arts and charisma to seduce the other houses, that he was plotting to usurp Liam's birthright. She painted a grim picture of civil war, of brother fighting brother, all orchestrated by a cunning, ambitious bastard. Then she confronted Valerius. She came to him not as a wife, but as a political adversary delivering an ultimatum. Her voice was cold as winter steel. "You must choose," she declared, "him or the stability of Valoria. If you allow him to remain, the houses will divide. This realm will crumble from within long before the shadow arrives. Do you protect one bastard boy, or do you protect the legacy of your ancestors and the future of 100,000 souls?" Her words were like spear points driving into Valerius's heart. He looked out from the highest rampart, saw the proud flag of his dominion snapping in the wind, and knew with a sickening certainty that she was right. He was a lord first, a father second. Torn between love and duty, between his heart and his crown, Valerius made the most agonizing decision of his life. He decreed that Anya and Matteo were to be exiled to the Ashlands. It was a barren, cursed frontier, a desolate wasteland where criminals and the forsaken were sent to be forgotten by the world. It was said that the very air was poison, and that no one sent there survived for more than a year. On a cold, misty morning before the sun had risen, Anya and Matteo were dragged from their tower. Valerius stood on a high balcony, watching from the shadows, his heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. He could not bring himself to face his son. As Matteo was led away by the guards, he looked up and saw his father's silhouette. He didn't cry. He didn't call out. He just looked, his young face a mask of confusion and profound hurt. That single look would burn itself into Valerius's memory and haunt his dreams for the rest of his days. When the great iron-banded gates of the citadel slammed shut behind them, they didn't just close off Matteo's home, they sealed off his heart. The 8-year-old boy, with his mother at his side, began the long walk toward a place men called Hell on Earth, armed with nothing but a little food and a broken heart. The Ashlands were worse than the darkest legends. This was no mere wasteland, it was a scar upon the earth, a place where color came to die. An endless expanse of gray dust and cracked earth stretched out under a perpetually overcast skimiti. The air was thick, heavy with the stench of rot and a biting cold that seeped into the bones, defying the weak, distant sun. Skeletal trees, long dead, clawed at the sky like the hands of the damned. The wind howled through the canyons, not a natural sound, but a mournful keen, like the weeping of trapped souls. This was a land forgotten by the gods and forsaken by man, a vast open grave for the outcast and the unwanted. Anya and Matteo were left at the edge of this desolate expanse with only a small loaf of stale bread and a single water skin. With every step, clouds of ash billowed up, clinging to their clothes, their skin, working their way into their throats and lungs until they choked and coughed. The toxic air, what the locals called the ashen breath, began its insidious work immediately. Anya, with her healer's knowledge, recognized the poison slowly sapping their strength. She felt her own body weakening, and worse, she saw it in Matteo. The boy, once so vibrant and full of life, now stumbled beside her, his face pale and drawn, his lips cracked and dry. He never complained. He simply held her hand, his small frame trembling with the effort to appear strong. His silence was a torment more profound than any cry of pain. The water ran out first, then the bread. Hunger and thirst were constant companions, but their most fearsome enemy was the sickness. One afternoon, Matteo collapsed. A violent fever seized him, shaking his small body uncontrollably. His skin burned to the touch, yet he shivered as if frozen. He began to cough up small flecks of blood, the telltale sign that the ashen breath had taken root deep inside him. Anya held him, trying to warm him with her own body, but it was futile. She frantically searched for the familiar herbs of her homeland, but found only withered roots and poisonous fungi. Her knowledge was useless here. She was helpless. Her son, her only light in a world of darkness, was dying in her arms. The sight of his suffering, the sound of his shallow, rasping breaths, became unbearable. In a moment of absolute despair, Anya did what no mother should ever have to do. She gently laid Matteo in the shallow shelter of a rocky overhang, hoping to shield him from the relentless wind. She kissed his feverish brow one last time, then turned and walked away. She wasn't abandoning him. She was fleeing the agony of watching him die. She collapsed a short distance away, burying her face in her hands, her silent sobs shaking her entire body, her tears leaving clean streaks on her ash-stained face. Meanwhile, Matteo drifted in and out of a feverish delirium. His conscious mind was shutting down, but deep in his subconscious, his father's lessons flickered like dying embers. He remembered the afternoons in the secret gardens, Valerius's voice explaining how some life forms could thrive in the darkest, most hostile environments, drawing sustenance from stone and shadow. A hazy image formed in his mind, a particular moss that grew in the dampest corners of the castle walls. With a final instinctual surge of will to survive, Matteo's trembling hand reached out, groping blindly across the cold, damp ground beside him. His fingers brushed against something soft and cool. He forced his heavy eyelids open. In the gloom of the rock shelter, he saw it, a faint, ethereal green glow. It was a strange, phosphorescent moss clinging to a thin trickle of groundwater seeping from a fissure in the rock. Without thinking, driven by a primal urge, he scraped a small clump of the moss and pushed it into his mouth. The taste was bitter and earthy, but almost immediately a cooling sensation spread through his body. The fire in his chest subsided. His breathing eased slightly. He took another clump and then another. Slowly, miraculously, the raging fever began to recede. When Anya, having cried until she had no tears left, finally forced herself to return, expecting to face the ultimate horror, she froze. Matteo was still breathing. His breaths were deeper now, and the deathly pallor had begun to fade from his face. She saw the faint green residue around his mouth, then looked into the overhang and saw the source of the faint, miraculous light. This was no simple miracle sent from the heavens. This was a miracle born of memory, of a father's stolen love, and of the indomitable life force of a child who refused to surrender to his fate. In that moment, Matteo was not just saved. He had found his purpose. He had found his weapon against the dying of the light. Many long years passed in the Ashlands, years that would have broken a lesser man. But for Matteo, they were not years of mere survival. They were years of forging. The slender boy who had stumbled into this wasteland was now a tall, powerful man. The sun and wind had weathered his skin to a tough leather, and his stone-gray eyes, once filled with a child's hurt, now held the depth and stillness of an ancient mountain, reflecting the harsh beauty of the land he now called home. The phosphorescent moss that had saved his life became his obsession. He dedicated years to studying it, learning its cycles, understanding how it purified the groundwater it grew near, and how its properties countered the effects of the ashen breath. He discovered that by combining the glow moss, as he called it, with certain deep earth roots, he could create a potent remedy, a poultice that could draw the sickness from the lungs, and a tea that could restore strength to the weakened. The Ashlands were a dumping ground for the dregs of society. Thieves, political exiles, families condemned by false accusations. They lived in a state of perpetual fear and desperation, fighting over scraps and dying slowly from the sickness. Matteo began to seek them out. He came not as a conqueror, but as a healer. He shared his medicine freely, dressed their wounds, and taught them how to find the hidden seams of clean water where the glow moss thrived. At first, they met him with suspicion and hostility. But as they watched the gravely ill recover, as they saw their children laughing again, instead of succumbing to the plague, their distrust melted away. A community began to coalesce around him. They stopped living in scattered, fearful isolation. They worked together to build sturdy shelters from salvaged wood and stone. They learned to cultivate small gardens in patches of earth cleansed by the purified water. They formed patrols to protect themselves from the roving gangs of bandits that preyed on the weak. They called him the Moss Leader. The name was whispered with a reverence that bordered on awe. Matteo didn't rule with laws or force. He led with kindness, with wisdom, and with a deep, abiding compassion born from his own suffering. He taught them that even in a cursed land, life could flourish if people chose to stand together. He had turned a graveyard into a sanctuary, a kingdom of the forgotten. This kingdom had no marble towers or silken banners, but it had something far more precious. It had life, it had hope, and it had a leader with no crown upon his head, but with a kingdom in his heart. He had proven that a man could be stripped of everything, his family, his status, his inheritance, but no one could strip him of his will to create and his capacity to heal. Matteo had forged his own legacy, a legacy cultivated from ashes. While Matteo was building a new world from the ruins of his old one, the prophecy of the Great Shadow began to manifest in Valoria with a terrifying vengeance. The curse that Lady Alara had tried to banish to the frontier had returned home to roost, more virulent and deadly than ever. The ashen breath was no longer contained. It rode the winds, creeping through mountain passes, and finally descended upon the lush, green fields of the Dominion. The first sign was the wheat, which withered and turned gray overnight. Livestock sickened and died in their pastures for no apparent reason. Then the sickness came for the people. A dry cough, a low fever, and then within days, death. The plague spread with horrifying speed from the outlying villages to the crowded streets at the foot of the citadel itself. Panic gripped the kingdom. The prosperity and order that Valerius and Alara had sacrificed so much to maintain were crumbling into dust, a sandcastle against a tidal wave of death. But the cruelest blow was yet to fall. One morning, Liam, the golden heir, the hope of Valoria, awoke with a cough. His face was flushed with fever. Ilara's world fell apart. She summoned the finest physicians in the realm, but their knowledge was useless. Every potion, every prayer was powerless against the ashen breath. The boy who was supposed to be Valoria's savior now lay helpless, his breath growing shallower with every passing hour. The irony was savage. The very weapon Ilara had used to banish Matteo, the Ashlands and its endemic plague, had now returned to claim the son she cherished above all else. Her pride, her political maneuvering, had all been punished in the most devastating way imaginable. The prophecy of the shadow was coming true, not through war or invasion, but through the consequences of their own past actions. Valoria was dying, and so was its heir. In the depths of their despair, when all hope seemed lost, a strange rumor reached the ears of Lord Valerius. A traitor, having barely escaped the Ashlands, told an incredible story. He spoke of a thriving community of exiles led by a mysterious man known as the Moss Leader, who possessed a cure for the plague. To Valerius, it sounded like a madman's fantasy, but looking at his dying son, he was willing to grasp at any straw, no matter how fragile. He had no idea who this leader was. He only knew it was their last chance. He immediately dispatched his most elite company of royal guards, laden with gold and jewels, with a single command: find this man and bring him back at any cost. When the guards arrived in the Ashlands, they were met with a sight that defied belief. Before them lay not a desolate wasteland, but an organized and thriving settlement. And when Matteo stepped forward to meet them, they stared in stunned silence. The man who stood before them, tall and commanding, with an aura of quiet authority, bore an uncanny resemblance to their own Lord Valerius. Matteo listened to their desperate plea. His face was an unreadable mask, his heart a calm lake. After all these years, they finally needed him. He looked toward the distant mountains of Valoria, and for a fleeting moment, the image of a heartbroken 8-year-old boy flashed in his mind. But then he looked at his people, the outcasts who had built a life with him from nothing. He knew what he had to do. He agreed to return. Matteo's journey back to the citadel was not the triumphant return of a hero. It was the silent homecoming of a ghost. He traveled alone, refusing an escort, wearing a simple traveler's cloak and carrying only a small leather pouch filled with the glowing green moss. When he strode into the great hall of Valoria, a hush fell over the entire assembly. The courtiers, the lords, the ladies, all froze. Lord Valerius and Lady Ilara stood on the royal dais, and as their eyes fell upon the visitor, the world seemed to stop turning. That face, those eyes, it was unmistakable. It was Matteo. Valerius felt the stone floor beneath him sway. The son he had condemned, the son he had assumed was long dead in the Ashlands, was standing before him, alive, powerful, radiating an aura of command that rivaled his own. Ilara's face went white as bone. She staggered back a step, her hand flying to her mouth. The ghost they had tried so hard to bury in their memories had returned in the flesh. He hadn't come with an army to claim his revenge. He had come as their only hope. In that single silent moment, the entire power dynamic of the kingdom was inverted. The outcast, the dispossessed, now held the life of the realm, and more importantly, the life of his own brother, in the palm of his hand. The great hall held its collective breath, waiting to see if this ghost from the past would choose mercy or retribution. Matteo offered no greeting to Valerius or Ilara. He walked past them as if they were statues, his gaze fixed on the archway that led to the royal chambers. His silence was a judgment more potent than any accusation. As he moved, the crowd parted before him, their bows and curtsies now a mixture of awe, fear, and dawning shame. He entered Liam's room. The boy lay pale and still upon the great bed, his breathing faint. Matteo sat beside him, looking for a long moment at the face of the brother he had never known. He saw his father's features there and, perhaps, a shadow of the mother who had orchestrated his life's tragedy. But as he looked, he felt no anger, only a profound sense of compassion. He calmly took a pinch of the glowing moss from his pouch, mixed it with water from a bedside carafe, and gently coaxed the liquid between Liam's dry lips. Then he placed his hand on his brother's forehead. As his skin touched his brother's, a miracle occurred. From a faded scar on Matteo's hand, a scar left by a poisonous plant in the castle gardens long ago, a warm green light began to emanate. At the exact same moment, an identical scar on Liam's hand, caused by the same plant in the same garden, began to glow in response. The two lights flowed toward each other, merging into a soft, brilliant aura that enveloped them both. The gloomy chamber was filled with a gentle radiance. Liam's breathing deepened, and a touch of color returned to his cheeks. At that precise moment, the old scholar, the keeper of the royal archives, burst into the room, his face alight with a wild discovery. He carried a crumbling scroll. "My lord, we were wrong. All these years, we were wrong," he gasped. He unrolled the ancient parchment, revealing the original text of the prophecy. He pointed a trembling finger at a single, complex glyph. "This symbol," he explained, his voice cracking with emotion, "it does not mean a single heir. The proper translation is the heirs of unity." He read the full line aloud. "The shadow shall be banished, and the light restored, when the blood of the mountain, the symbol of House Valerius, and the blood of the river, the symbol of Anya's Deepwood clan, are joined as one in purpose. The power of salvation lies not in an individual, but in the union of the sundered halves." The great hall was utterly silent. Valerius and Alara looked from the scroll to their two sons, bathed in the miraculous light, and they understood. They understood everything. The prophecy was never about a chosen one. It was about reconciliation. The very tragedy they had created was, in fact, the key to its fulfillment. The weight of her guilt finally crushed Alara. She descended from the dais, her royal composure shattered. She walked to where Matteo stood and to where Anya had quietly appeared in the doorway. And there Lady Alara, the proudest woman in Valoria, sank to her knees. Tears of profound remorse streamed down her face. "Forgive me," she sobbed. "Forgive me." This was not an ending of vengeance and overthrow. It was an ending of understanding. It subverted the classic tale of the exiled heir returning to claim a throne. Instead, it championed the healing power of unity and the strength found in forgiveness. From that day forward, Valoria was reborn. Matteo and Liam, the two brothers, the two halves of the prophecy, ruled together. Matteo brought his knowledge of healing, his wisdom of the land, and his deep connection to the common people. Liam brought his legitimate authority, the loyalty of the noble houses, and his skill in statecraft. They complemented each other perfectly. Together, they eradicated the ashen breath, transforming the blighted Ashlands into a green and fertile territory. Under their joint rule, Valoria entered a new golden age, an era more brilliant and resilient than any before it. An age founded not on power and bloodlines, but on harmony and compassion. Matteo's story doesn't conclude with a crown being placed upon his head, but with the quiet strength of an embrace between two brothers. It is not a tale of a winner and a loser, but a timeless testament to a greater truth. Our true worth is not defined by our circumstances of birth, by status or inheritance, but by the choices we make and the character we forge in the fires of adversity. His journey reminds us that sometimes our deepest wounds, our most painful losses, are the very places through which the light of truth and compassion can shine most brightly. In your own life's journey, perhaps you have known a moment or a season where you felt like Matteo, left out, underestimated, pushed to the margins. Perhaps you have walked through your own personal Ashlands, a place where hope seemed a distant and foolish luxury. But remember this, even in the bleakest and most barren of landscapes, there are always hidden springs of inner strength and phosphorescent glimmers of potential waiting to be discovered. The greatest power is not what you inherit from others, but what you build for yourself from the ashes of your own hardships. And who knows, perhaps your very existence, your resilience, your unique kindness is the answer to a prophecy this world doesn't even know it's waiting for. The story of Matteo and Liam is a profound reminder that true greatness is found not in excluding those who are different, but in finding a way to harmonize with them. If you believe in the power of forgiveness, if you believe that unity can heal the deepest of divisions, and if you want to join us on this path of discovering more stories with this kind of transformative power, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support is the lifeblood that allows us to continue telling the forgotten stories, the ones with the power to light a candle of hope in all our hearts. Thank you for listening.